Thank you to everybody for joining us tonight, and I'm going to pass the torch to our main speaker, which is Brooke.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Brooke, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, guys. My sobriety date's June 30th, 2010. I have a home group, Connect the Dots. We have 4 meetings a week. My favorite one is on Monday, but they're all fantastic. And it's a similar format as this meeting. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I sponsor women as well. And those were some of the last things I wanted to have or do when I got sober. I wanted to sit in the back row and talk smack about everyone, find my new boyfriend and my new best friend. But those are the things that keep me sober today. So I always like to give a little shout out. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. I was super excited to do this. I started a new job and I've been working like 9 days straight, and I really just needed to be in a meeting tonight. So thank you for having me. I'm from California originally. My parents got married when they were really, really young. They were like 19. They had my brother when they were 20 and me when they were 21, and they were divorced by the time I was 2. That does not make me an alcoholic, but I really used that to blame all of my problems on for a really long time. And it definitely helped me feel like I was different from everyone around me. My mom remarried when I was 4, and we moved to Michigan. And over the next several years, we moved several times. My mom got divorced again. And we finally ended up in New Jersey, and I was 14 and had lived in 7 states. And I just always felt different. I didn't feel like I was a part of. And I remember from a very young age, every time we moved, I was like, okay, this is my moment. I'm gonna go to a new place where like nobody knows me, and I'm just gonna start over again, and I'm gonna be friends with all the like the cool and popular people. And everywhere I went, I showed up. Right? And it was the same experience over and over again. So I feel like I had that alcoholic thinking like a decade before I even started drinking. So I hit high school in New Jersey, and I had lived in a very like oppressive environment. And when we moved, that it was kind of like I was let out of prison. And my mom used to say it was like I had a midlife crisis. Like I just got in trouble right away. I started smoking cigarettes. I started drinking New Year's Eve in 1994. And I was one of those kids that just, I knew how to find the right people who had goods that I liked, and I introduced them to my friends. And I was the friend that your parents warned you about. I was the bad influence. And anytime I got my hands on something new, I'd introduce my friends to it. I one that got them high for the first time. And it just kind of went like that. But I did start having consequences pretty quickly. They tried to do an intervention on me, I think, when I was like 16. I was 10 years sober before I even realized it was an intervention because I was so disconnected from reality. It was like 20 years later, I was sitting in a meeting one day, and I was like, when they sat me down at that white table and asked me about my habits, that was an intervention, you know? I, of course, lied through my teeth, right? I didn't tell them the truth about anything. My mom wouldn't let them drug test me or do anything else. I think I might have talked to like this like guidance counselor and a psychologist. I remember like doing some tests, whatever, but I wouldn't admit to anything, and they couldn't really get me. But I'm a troublemaker, so I would get into fights, and I wouldn't show up to class, and I would skip school, and I was truant, and eventually I just set myself up. I got expelled. That was one of the first major resentments I remember having. I was so offended because I felt like I wasn't as bad as some of the other kids, and they got to go to this like little school in the basement of my high school, but they just like totally expelled me from the entire school system, which I thought was very unfair. And I was like, I was the scapegoat, right? Like I was the weird kid, and they used me as an example of what's gonna happen to you if you act up. And I would talk about that at bars when I was like 28 years old. Like, you know, like it was like my life story. So I did end up going to an alternative school For smart kids, really bad kids is what that means. And I literally was picked up in a short bus like every single day, and they would let us smoke on property. They had a smoking room. So all these things that might have kind of interfered with me showing up for school, I actually did show up to that school. You know, I didn't have gym or PE. We like went bowling and we played pool at like the pool hall. Okay, this was also the 90s. I don't think they would do any of that stuff today, but like the 90s were cool. So, and so I ended up actually graduating on time. I did not get sober. I kept drinking and doing other things, but I did graduate on time, which today I'm very, very grateful for, because I know how many obstacles I faced when I finally did get sober. I am one of those people that I would not have gotten a GED at 18. I would have been getting that when I got sober. So it was one thing I didn't have to deal with. A lot of my family is pretty well educated. My mom got a master's degree while I was in high school. I have like grandparents who have master's degrees and PhDs and that kind of thing. And so education was important. And my mom just assumed I was going to go to college and follow that path. And I had horrible grades. I barely passed. And so I started with community college. I was like high when I took my entrance exam. And so I was in like remedial English and remedial math. And I dropped out like the first semester I tried community college. And I kept drinking. And at one point I started getting really bad panic attacks. I was about 19 years old. And so I put everything down, right? I stopped all the drugs, I stopped drinking, and I am a graduate of the DARE program. I had the t-shirt that said, "Just say no." My friends and I would cross out no, so that it said, "Just say yes," which I thought was like very original and creative until I came to AA. And apparently everybody did that when they were teenagers. So I was like, all right, drugs are bad. Just won't do that anymore, and I'm just gonna like be clean. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I didn't think I was an alcoholic, so I didn't like seek out any places. I didn't seek out AA, nothing. I just thought, I'm just gonna stop on my own and it'll be fine. And I was uncomfortable again. And over that next year and a half, I just got more and more uncomfortable in my skin. And one night I was at a motel party. I used to call it a hotel party, like I'm fancy, but it was like a Red Roof Inn on the side of the highway. Not a fancy place to hang out. It was like one of those things where like most of us were too young to like drink or whatever. And so it was like two friends got a couple of rooms. The rest of us ran up the fire escape, and they were all hanging out drinking. And I'm sitting in the corner feeling sorry for myself, which I'm still really, really good at. It's a special talent. And and I remember thinking, like, watching my friends, and they were having fun, and they were drinking, and they seemed so relaxed, and they were laughing. And I was just like, maybe if I have a drink, like, I'll feel the same way. And it was just this little thought, like, I won't do this other stuff, right? Like, drugs are bad, but a drink will be fine. I also have family members who are alcoholics, and I had been introduced to the idea of alcoholism from a pretty young age. And so I was just like, I just won't drink like they do, right? It's like a will thing. They don't care. That's why they drink like that. Now, I'm not that bright, so I didn't get that idea until like 2 a.m. in the morning. And in New Jersey, you really have to plan out your drinking because everything closes by 2 a.m. So the way I started my drinking career is I went around the room and I started picking up other people's leftover drinks, and it was disgusting. The beer was like mostly flat. Some of them had cigarette butts in them, and then I kept forgetting which bottle had the cigarette butts, so I would go back to the same one and try to like take a swish. But anyways, and but I got enough to get that sense of relief I had been looking for, and suddenly like I was the life of the party, and it was like my whole life lit up, you know. And that first night was great. I didn't pass out, I didn't black out, I didn't throw up. When I woke up the next day, I knew where I was. I wasn't even like hungover. And for some reason, like Katya, I remembered this little thought that next morning of, okay, cool, I can drink. Like, no big deal. I'll just have some drinks, it'll be good. I was 20 years old. By the time I was 22, I was drinking so much I would show up to work. And mind you, my job started at like 3:30 in the afternoon because I could not cut it with like morning jobs at all. And my hands would shake, you know. And I was working at the mall in the town where I had gotten expelled from that high school. And I would run into people that I knew from high school, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Brooke, how are you?" My hands would be shaking. I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm really good. You know, I'm just like figuring things out." And I just must have really seemed totally crazy. I'm sure I stunk of booze, and like that glaze would come over their eyes, you know, and they would start to like back away and be like, "Oh, that's great. We're glad you're doing well." And they would try to get out of the conversation like as quick as they could. And I was still really in denial about my alcoholism. I was actually thinking about this today. I was working at the mall for like a year and a half, and then I decided it was time for me to get an office job, right? And my friend got me a job at this title company she worked for that has to do with real estate. And I show up like the first week and I'm fine, and then the second week I'm showing up a little late, and the third week I'm making up excuses that I'm sick, and I'm just in denial about the fact that like I have alcoholism, and when I start drinking, I can't control how much I drink, and I drink all night, and I don't show up the next day no matter what's going on. And it's like, right, they talk about it in the fifth step where like I'm living this double life where I'm trying to show up and start a career in this office and get some skills, right? I'm 22 years old. I need to be a grown up. I'm paying rent. I'm paying car insurance. And then the other half of me is just drinking, drinking, drinking. And of course, I got fired from that job. And I ended up moving back in with my mom, which is what tough girls from Jersey do. We move in with mommy when things fall apart. And that basically describes like the next 7 or 8 years of my life, right? I move to a different place, get a new job, sometimes get a new boyfriend. I clean up for a little while, and then the cracks start to show after a few months. And when things fall apart, I move back in with mommy. Then I try to get my life back together, move out, same thing over and over and over again. And the unfortunate part is that I do clean up really well for a little while. And I end up attracting people who have no idea what kind of insane alcoholic they have on their hands. Like I show up and I have a job and I'm happy. And like, I like to go out and party, but it's not that bad. And I'm 25, 26, and it seems like everyone else is doing the same kind of thing, right? And then I remember I started dating this guy when I was 24, and he would joke with his friends and be like, she drank 8 beers last night. Like she can drink you under the table. And everybody thought it was really funny and cool. And then a couple of years later, when I told them that I was an alcoholic and I was going to AA, they were like, "Yeah, that makes sense." You know? And I did go to Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time when I was 26. I didn't really, if I'm being honest, I didn't actually have a desire to stop drinking. I'm sorry, I lied about that when I came here. But what I really wanted was people to back off. My boss was threatening to fire me. My boyfriend was threatening to kick me out. My mom would call me occasionally and she would be like, "Brookie, is everything okay?" And I would get mad at her and I'd be like, "Yeah, things are fine. Like, why? Why do you keep asking?" Not realizing she would call me and I wouldn't answer the phone and I wouldn't call her back for like months at a time, you know? And I remembered my Uncle Tom, when I was 10 years old, was trying to get sober and he was in the hospital detoxing. And my Granny Chris said at the dinner table, "All right, Uncle Tom's getting sober. He's detoxing. He's really, really sick right now. So we need to be really supportive and we need to help him and he's going to be okay." And that's how I want people to treat me. Like, right? I just want you to be in a place where you want to help me. And Alcoholics Anonymous seemed like a good place for that to happen. So I go to a couple of meetings. I tell my boss that I'm an alcoholic and I'm in recovery now. And she was so happy. She's like, "You know, we're so happy for you. Anything that you need, we're here to support you." And I tell my boyfriend And he's over the moon, and he's like, I think that's a great idea. And he thinks I'm gonna start showing up to like family functions and not get drunk and curse out his family and do insane things and black out and then forget about it the next day. And why is everyone angry? I thought we had a good time, you know? And it went well for about 2 weeks, but I hated you guys immediately. You smiled way too much. You were way too happy. Sobriety was miserable. I hated being sober. And going to a meeting was like going to last call at the bar, right? Where the lights start to come on and it's like everybody runs like cockroaches. And they always lied because I'd be like, can I have one more drink? And they're like, sure, no problem. And I never had time to finish my drink and they would take it from me. And then I would try to fight the bouncer and I don't know how to fight, so it never went well. You know, and that was what it was like going to AA for me. And you guys had these horrible stories, right? Like people losing their families, their kids, their careers, houses, cars, blah, 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 which now I understand is terrible. But at the time I was like, I never lost a house. I had never owned a house, which is a minor detail, right? That's not the point. The point is I never lost one. I never lost my kids. I also didn't have any kids. I didn't lose my career. Again, didn't have a career. I mean, there's a pattern here, but I'm very delusional about my alcoholism. And I was like, I'm so glad you guys found a place like that helps you. You need it. And my life just got a little out of control, and I think everything is fine. I don't think I have what you have. And there were people who talked about their drinking, and I probably could have related to it, but I didn't want to be alcoholic. If I really was alcoholic, that meant I was going to have to stop drinking. And one night, my boyfriend went to sleep, and there was a liquor store across the street, and they stayed open until 11 p.m., and I knew I could get packaged goods. And I remember sneaking down the apartment stairs, and I was like, I already felt better. I didn't even have a drink in me yet. It was just the idea of getting it. Like I felt like I had like butterflies. Like I was going to a party. I was buying a 6-pack and drinking by myself, but like that felt like a party, you know? And I learned pretty quickly that if you throw the evidence under the couch, the boyfriend finds it right away, because apparently I stink like booze the way I drink. It just comes out of my pores even when I take a shower. And so I learned to like throw the evidence out into the dumpster out in the garage. And then he spent the next 2 years just living in this like insane world where I'm constantly lying about what I'm doing. I'm driving my car around and parking in a different spot, pretending I'm going to work. And he knows that I'm lying, but like I will never ever cop to anything. And I just stole his sanity for the next couple of years. I ended up in detox when I was 28. And when I got out, I started going to outpatient. And this time I did have a desire to stop drinking, but I didn't want to do the steps. I loved the people who were like, the steps are just a suggestion. I was like, yes, you know, like I just wanted to go to meetings and that be enough for me to be sober, you know. And my favorite person in the rooms was always the guy with 25 years that had never worked a step and was like the angriest dude you've ever met. I loved that guy, right? Because we were so similar, you know. And I started going to outpatient, and I did the outpatient dance where I would like fraternize with the other clients, get them drunk, get me drunk, much like high school, get kicked out. Then I'd go to the next outpatient, fraternize, get them drunk, get me drunk, get kicked out again. You know, and I would go to meetings sometimes, and I was always on the fringes and always finding reasons why I was different. And so for the next couple of years, I did that. And I drank a lot, and I drank insanely. I was living with my mom again at this time, and so she brought the problem home, and so I'm drinking insanely in her house and threatening to kill her and hurt my brother, who was also living there. And I remember towards the end, like I didn't want to drink anymore, but I didn't know how to stop. And it seemed like sometimes I didn't drink every single day. I used to say like I didn't wake up and drink in the morning. That's not true totally. I did drink in the morning. It's just I wouldn't go to sleep, so I would just drink all night long and still be drinking in the morning time. So, but there were times where I would be sober for a couple of days, and I would tell myself things like, I'm going to wait until the weekend, or I'm going to wait until I get a job, and then I'll go out and I'll have a drink. And I would almost always end up drunk again by that night, you know, or by the next day. And I, at that point, had realized that no matter what I did, I was always going to pick up that drink again, and just lived like that for 3 years, you know. And the other weird thing is that I didn't know Alcoholics Anonymous actually treated that. I did not realize that other people also suffered from the mental obsession. I didn't understand that you also didn't have a defense against that first drink. I genuinely was just like, there's something really wrong with me. Nobody can help me. I had gone to therapy, I'd gone on medication, and I just got drunk over and over and over again. And somehow I'd missed that part, even though like my dad and my uncle were sober by this point, but still didn't understand that we suffered from the same thing, you know. And I had been drinking for like 8 or 9 years at this point. And so I don't know, I think at the end I was just drinking to survive. You know, I always felt this like impending sense of doom whenever I would accidentally sober up, and I would like try to get drunk as quick as I could to get away from that sense of doom, but then I would sober up again and it would still be there like waiting for me. And it got to the point that I couldn't drink enough tonight to make tomorrow bearable, right? Every day I just suffered. And I really came back to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was at a bar one night and I wasn't drinking, not on purpose, it just kind of happened. But I hadn't been drinking for like a little while. I wasn't sober, I was taking sleeping pills, which to me was sober, but I actually had not picked up a drink in a couple of months at that point. But I was still hanging out with all the same people. I still went to the bar. I went to dive bars where everybody's getting plastered, right? We're not hanging out having like cocktails and wearing like dresses or something like that. I was not that kind of drinker, you know? And I remember thinking like, the men are not as cute as I remember them being, you know, now that I'm actually sober in this bar. And my friends are not as smart as I remember them being. And like, what am I doing here? And I went out in the parking lot and there was this guy standing there and he was drinking a Red Bull. And I thought that was weird because I'm the only idiot who goes to the bar and doesn't drink. So I walked right up to him and I was like, do you not drink? And he's like, no, I'm actually a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm sober. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sober too. He's like, yeah, I have 5 years. I was like, I don't have that much time. You know, and then he was like, oh, cool. Like, what meetings do you go to? And then I gave the alcoholic response, right? Of a person who's like trying to get sober, but not really get sober. I was like, well, I don't like the meetings in my area. And I'm like still thinking about what I'm trying to do. And I like was waiting for the lecture because that's usually what I got from people, right? The lecture, don't you think you should do something? Don't you want to get better? Don't you want to go to college? I don't know why my mom kept talking about college. I literally dropped out 5 times by this point, like, give it up, you know? But he didn't do that. He kind of did what we were doing tonight. He just talked a little bit about his drinking, and he talked about what happened when he got sober, and then he mentioned some meetings I might want to check out. You know, and he was cute too, and kind of young. So I was like, okay. So a few days later, I went to one of those meetings that he mentioned. I never saw him again, right? I mostly went because I thought he was going to be there. But God doesn't really care what reason you have for coming to a meeting. God cares about what we do when we get here, right? And so I went back to that meeting again the next week. I didn't go to any other meetings that week. I thought one meeting was like good. So following Tuesday, I went to that meeting again, And I met this woman, Josie, and she invited me to a different meeting. So first, she actually tricked me. She invited me out to coffee, and then we went to a different meeting. So I ended up going to 2 meetings in 1 week, right? And I was like, I'm doing so good. And then she introduced me to my first sponsor, Crystal. And Crystal was amazing. I was a terrible sponsee, though. I was not sponsorable at all. So Crystal, like, right away gave me structures. She suggested I get a home group. She said, why don't you come to my home group? She said, get a commitment. She told me to call her every day. She gave me like kind of a timeline of when to call. She was in college at the time, and she was like, I'm in class between 12:30 and like 1:45. If you call me while I'm in class, I'm not gonna answer, so don't call me then, or else it doesn't count. So I'd call her when I knew she was in class. I'd leave her a message and be like, okay, good. I called her like she told me to, you know? And we would make like plans to meet up and go through the big book, and I would like randomly fall asleep and like sleep through. It'd be in the afternoon. I would just like take a nap and like not show up to our appointments. And she took me on my first panel, and I don't remember what I said. It probably wasn't much of a message, but whatever, it was a detox, that's fine. And so she really showed me what a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous did. So while I wasn't necessarily a very good sponsee, it kind of kept me around AA for a couple of months. And then one weekend I went to a convention in New York City, and I ran into somebody that I had met when I was in detox a couple of years before, and he had been sober around the same amount of time as I was, and he invited me to his home group, and I was like so excited, and I showed up to his home group, and there was just something, I don't know, they were like excited about AA, but they weren't like nerdy. They made it seem like really cool, and I just wanted what they had. You know, they were kind of like inappropriate. They told like really inappropriate jokes. I felt like I fit right in, you know? So that night, this guy's sitting and he's talking to me, and he just starts asking me questions. I have no clue what's going on. I think we're just talking, right? And he says, when you start drinking, can you control how much you drink? And I have 10 years of evidence that once I start, I don't stop, right? I think 2 or 3 drinks, or I'm gonna stop at 11 p.m. And once I put that drink in me, it feels like I just changed my mind, or I just want one more, or I'll just drink for 1 more hour and then I'm gonna go to bed. And I just keep drinking and going and going and going. And I was like, no, I definitely can't control how much I drink. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. And when you put the drink down, can you control whether you pick the drink back up again? And I was like, again, 3 years of desperately wanting to stop drinking and telling myself, this is it, I'm done. And then I'm drunk again the next day or the next week or the next month. And I'm like, no, definitely not. And he's like, huh, it's interesting. And then he said, do you think there's something in Alcoholics Anonymous that can help you? Now, I wasn't prone to being like very honest at that time. I usually lied about everything because I wanted to impress you, or I wanted you to think of me as somebody I probably wasn't, right? But I was unusually honest with him, and I said, I don't know if AA can help me, but I see that it helps other people, and so I hope so, right? And that was all I had, just like a tiny little bit of hope. I didn't really understand what alcoholism was. I wasn't even sure if I was alcoholic. I didn't know if anything would work because I had drank over and over and over again, but like, I hoped so. Like, I thought maybe, deep down inside, I thought maybe like something was so wrong with me that even Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't gonna fix it, you know? And he was like, okay, interesting. And then he talked a little bit about a tradition in that home group where when someone's ready to do their 3rd step, everybody goes into the sanctuary, and people take turns sharing their experience with the 3rd step. And then they all say the 3rd step prayer together. And like, I desperately wanted to be a part of something. I remember thinking inside, like, please ask me, please ask me, please ask me, right? And so he's like, would you like to do that? And I was like, yeah, that seems cool, like I tried to play it off, but like inside I was like, finally, I was gonna be a part of something. And so we went to the sanctuary, everybody shared their experience. I'm sure it was amazing and spiritual. I don't remember a single word of anything that anyone said. I was busy thinking about myself, big surprise. I was like, what's this third step prayer? Like, I don't even know what they're talking about. Like, I'm gonna have to read in front of people, right? But they all read the third step prayer, and then I went last and I read it, and then we were done. And I didn't necessarily like feel different right away. I definitely did not have a white light experience. Most of the time going through the steps has been against my will. So I'm not a white light experience kind of gal, basically. But what happened was that I think it was the first time I followed direction from someone else, and I didn't argue, I didn't have an opinion on it. I just took the action, and that was it. And they all gave me a hug, and we went to the meeting after. And I remember that speaker talking about alcoholism and talking about how even when they were sober, they were so uncomfortable and they felt like they were an alien and they didn't belong on this planet. And I like related to that. And I was like, oh, if they feel that way and I feel that way, and here are the things that they did to get better, then maybe I can get better too. And what was interesting is a couple of days after that, I got a phone call from a mutual friend, and Crystal was in the hospital and she was going to be gone for a couple of weeks. But I already had like a safe place to land with these people, right? Up to that point, Crystal had kind of been my thread to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know if I hadn't met these people, if I would have stayed sober after that phone call, but I had somewhere to go, and I went through the fourth step really quickly. I went through the fifth step also. And again, fifth step was not a white light experience. Basically for me, it was hours of, okay, I get it, I'm wrong, I'm a jerk, I'm the worst person in the world, like, okay, fine, it's my fault, And finally, after I was done with my fifth step, standing up and being like, I don't want to ever do that again, like, that was horrible. And then going to dinner before my home group, and then going to our speaker meeting after. But what happened over the next few months after that fifth step was I started to realize that, like, I walk around angry all the time. I had had insomnia for like 20 years before I got sober, and even in early sobriety, because if I didn't drink or take a pill, like every time I tried to go to bed, it would be, I'd lay there, I'd think about the day, I think about the person who insulted me today and embarrassed me. And unfortunately, I am not witty and I am not quick on my feet, so I never have a good comeback. And then I think about that. And I think about tomorrow, when I see them, I'm gonna say this, and then they're gonna say that, and then I'm gonna say this back to them, and then I'm gonna make them feel the way I feel. And I can't sleep like that, And then what comes next usually is like the last 30 years of Brooke's life, and the top 10 most embarrassing things that have ever happened, or hurtful, or horrible, and it's just like that all the time. And I'm constantly filled with resentment because of that. So one, when I finished my fourth step, when I went to sleep that night, all that noise was quiet. And then two, I started realizing, like, people don't necessarily walk around like that. Don't ask me why they were my friends, but I had friends who were not alcoholics. They were fairly like normal people, and I would describe my day or my thinking, and they would look at me like there was something wrong with me, And I realized, like, I didn't have to walk around holding on to this resentment. Like, it was something I could let go of and look at where I was wrong and then move on with my life, right? And I didn't get that right away. I didn't get that when I finished my fifth step, but I started to understand that there was a different way to live over those next few months. The sponsor I had at the time believed a lot in sponsorship. And so as soon as I finished my 5th step, he was like, all right, now go out and sponsor people. And I was like, no, I don't want to help anyone. Like, that sounds like a lot of work. But also deep inside, like, I was the one who always needed help. And I felt like, why would anyone want me to sponsor them? I don't have anything to offer. I don't have anything good. And I think my sponsor knew that. And he was just like, you've had the experiences you've had that makes you uniquely qualified to help someone else. So just go, and if you're willing, God will make that happen. And that was my experience. I really didn't sponsor very many people in the beginning. It was a lot of like taking phone calls, giving rides, maybe reading a little of the doctor's opinion, and then they would drink, or they would get a different sponsor, which I don't blame them. I was not sober that long. But it kept me around, and it started to make me feel like I was useful. And I would have moments where someone would share something they were struggling with. I remember this woman at this retreat I went to was really struggling with the 2nd and 3rd step, which I had also, because I didn't know if I really believed in God, and I was afraid I couldn't do the steps. And I was able to share my experience with her and what I did. And a week later, I got a text message from her, and she said she had just finished her 3rd step with her sponsor. And I was just like, that's so cool, When I was a little over a year sober, I met a guy. He'd actually been a member of my home group when I got sober. He was there when I did my 3rd step prayer, or my 3rd step. He had moved in the interim, and he came back to celebrate 5 years of sobriety. And we started talking. Now, of course, he didn't live in the same state as me. He lived in Las Vegas, because, like, why date somebody who lives in the same state as you? That would only be sensible. But we started talking, and I went out to visit him a few times. And about 3 months into the relationship, we found out I was pregnant, which was very, very scary. I remember like texting my sponsor, like, I think I'm pregnant. Don't send your sponsor a text like that at 8 o'clock in the morning. Ask them if they can talk and tell them on the phone, okay? I got a call from my sponsor right away. And then I was like, what do I do? And he's like, you should call your boyfriend and talk to him about it. I was like, oh, right. So I called him, we talked, and then he's like, I need to call my sponsor. I was like, I understand, call me back. And it was a very uncertain time. We had not been dating that long. I lived on the East Coast, he lived here. And so it meant a lot of changes in our lives, but we decided that I would move out to Las Vegas and see if it could work between us, and we talked to our sponsors, and that's what we decided to do. And we lived together first, right, for a couple of months. Okay, can we get along living together? Now, I was less than 2 years sober and pregnant, so I was not a vision for you, but I was at that point very, very sponsorable. And everything that I had done in New Jersey, I started doing here. I got a home group, I got a new sponsor, this woman, Sharon, that I had been talking to for a while at that point. She lives in Los Angeles, and I was putting my hand out. I was trying to talk to newcomers. I started going through the steps again with her. I had made some amends at that point as well. And so we were like, okay, living together seems to be going all right. And we started talking about marriage. Okay, my parents got divorced when I was 2. I don't even have pictures of them together. I do now because my Uncle John sent me some pictures of them. That was like 5 years ago, So like I had grown up with no pictures and no memories of them together. And like marriage is a really big commitment, and not one that I'm like, I cheated on almost every single boyfriend I've ever had. Like, I don't know if I can do the marriage thing. And I remember calling Sharon, and she's like, well, what are you worried about? Divorce? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, listen, you're having a child together. That's actually more commitment than marriage will ever be. you will be committed to each other for the rest of your lives, whether you get married or not. Now, that's not very sentimental, but what I needed was something practical, not sentimental. If she had said something sentimental, I probably would have run. And I was like, okay, I can get that. That's right. You know, it's just fear is really what it was. When I did a fifth step with her, like, I had so many fears about getting married and that kind of thing, you know. And then my now husband came home one day and he had talked to somebody in AA and he was like, you know, we're just going to do marriage like we do sobriety, one day at a time. And I was like, I can do that. I can be married one day at a time. 10 days ago, we've been married for 13 years. And like, thank you. And that is all because of sponsorship, God, and Alcoholics Anonymous, like absolutely. That's not because of me and my husband, that's because of what AA has done for us. It's helped us show up and be better partners together. And then we had our daughter, and life was going all right. You know, we didn't have a lot of money, things were kind of tough, but we were sober, we were raising our daughter, we were having a good time. And then one day I got a phone call and a New York State detective told me that my mom had committed suicide. And I was just shy, I was like 4 days away from celebrating 3 years of sobriety. And I remember being like, oh my God, I think I'm gonna be sick. And I called my sponsor, and she didn't answer when I called her. I left her a message, but I had been well trained in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I had been going to meetings on a regular basis. I had been calling my sponsor on a regular basis. I had been talking to other people on a regular basis. And I didn't even think about drinking in that moment. I just called my husband, and then I called another friend in Alcoholics Anonymous and asked her to take me to a meeting that night, you know? And then my sponsor called me back, and I remember, like, I had made amends to my mom at this point, and I'd had some surrenders when I did another fifth step about how I really had a hard time showing her compassion. And so our relationship had been different a little bit that past year, but it was still like really, really hard. And I was like, I wasn't sure if I could do it. And Sharon said, you're gonna honor your mom's memory and you're gonna walk through this. And that's what I did, you know, and I flew out to New Jersey and my brother met me there and we packed up her things. And I had made amends to her side of the family a year before, so we were all connected and I was able to call them and ask them for help. And I was able to send her ashes to my grandmother so they could bury her. And I thought that was really cool how, like, through those amends I had made, I was able to help them be able to honor her memory too, you know? And then, and then to be honest, my sponsor told me to make friends with your emotions. And instead I was like, okay, I'm good. And I just pushed all the emotions down and just didn't think about it, didn't want to talk about it. And we ended up having our second daughter, and I started working in security, and I got really busy, and life was good, and I started going back to school, and things were fine. And then a few years ago, I don't know, I think I felt very, very overwhelmed. I was in college at this point. I think I was going to university, to UNLV. My kids were a little older, and I felt like I was always falling short as a parent. Like I just never felt like I was good enough. Like I used to have tantrums when me and my oldest, she was in like second or third grade, and we would do homework together. She wasn't having tantrums. I was having tantrums, literally. I would get mad and like stomp into our bedroom and slam the door because I could not handle doing homework with like my third grader, you know? And I started to get really resentful. I felt like if my mom was here, I would be a better parent. And all the stuff that I had been pushing down, like I just wanted to have this really cool experience in Alcoholics Anonymous and just send my mom off to the universe and like that be it, you know? But the truth is that I was mad at her. I was really mad at her. And for the next like several months, it was like I went through all that grieving that I wouldn't go through before. My husband is somebody who's super sentimental. He's like so sweet. And every once in a while he would mention my mom and he would start crying. He met her like twice, you know, he would start crying. He'd be like, don't you miss your mom? I'd be like, I don't want to talk about it, you know, and just shut down the conversation. So one day I walk into his office and I sit down and I start crying and I say, I miss my mom. And it was like the floodgates open. I would talk about it in meetings, and I don't know if I was always necessarily carrying a message, but I was being honest about where I was, and I was being honest that despite me feeling this way and being mad and missing her, like I don't want to drink, I don't have a desire to drink, like that doesn't seem like a solution to me, you know. And I did another inventory, and nothing special happened, but at some point I realized I didn't feel as overwhelmed being a parent. I felt like I actually was doing okay, and I felt like it was easier to show up, you know. So what also has happened is that the last 2 years have been a lot of surrenders. My husband started a business. It was doing really, really well for many, many years. I grew up like pretty poor on food stamps. I come from the mindset, if you don't own anything, you don't lose anything, right? And like buying a house together was a big deal because what happens if things don't work out and we can't keep the house, right? And through some bad decisions, part of it, he would try to talk to me about the business, and he'd try to tell me like the business was in trouble. And I would just be like, oh, I can't talk about this. I can't deal with this, you know, and I would just ignore it. And so he was left on his own to make decisions, and some of them weren't good decisions. And some things were out of his control, but what ended up happening is we had a ton of debt and we had no money. And we started making better decisions together. I talked to my sponsor. I saw that I wasn't showing up as a partner. He started talking to his sponsor a lot more and going to a lot more meetings. And so we started making better decisions, but we had already set the ball rolling. And sometimes the ball keeps rolling even if you make better decisions. And it's been a lot of like ego deflation and walking through a lot of financial fear and confronting that maybe we might lose the house, we might lose everything. And like, can I be okay doing that? Can I show up and not destroy my marriage and not yell at my kids because I'm stressed out? You know, I had left my job in security and started going to college full time. I got my associates in 2022. You know, and I felt like finally I was doing the thing I was supposed to be doing. I'm like so close to getting my bachelor's degree, and all I want to do is just finish my degree and then get a job. And I was very unwilling to go back to work. My husband told me, you need to go back to work 2 years ago. So I got a part-time job at a museum where I worked 5 or 10 hours a week, and like that was it. And I was like, I have a job, right? That doesn't count, by the way. That's not enough money, you know. While he's losing his business and not having an income, and all of our credit cards are maxed out, you know, and we're borrowing money from his family. And I'm like, but I have a job, 10 hours a week, and I just wanted to do it my way, and it has been so uncomfortable. And then about 2 months ago, I had been praying for the willingness to like do what I needed to do, which was probably putting a pause on UNLV and going and working full time. And 2 months ago, I finally got to the place of willingness. And once I was there, I was free, right? I still have fear, but I'm not driven by it. I'm just like, okay, I'll do what's necessary. And I ended up getting a job I had training last week and then started at my home store today. I work in e-commerce for Albertsons. It's not the job that I had dreamt for myself, but it's something, it's income, and I'd much rather be in a place of surrender than where I was 2 months ago, where I wanted to do it my way and I was letting like everything burn around me, you know, and I don't know, I kind of like what I'm doing right now. It's actually like not that terrible, and like I'm kind of good at it, which is nice, you know, and I don't know, I'm just glad to be here tonight and I'm glad to be sober. Thank you.